I had always been the kind of person who thrived on solitude. Crowded cities, constant noise, and the endless churn of human interaction drained me faster than any long day at work. So when I decided to take a week off last autumn, I didn't book flights or plan an elaborate itinerary. I rented a small cabin far away from everything. A place where the only sounds would be the wind in the trees and the crackle of a fire. The listing was perfect. Rustic cabin, secluded, surrounded by forest. Great for writers, artists, or anyone needing peace. It was exactly what I needed. The photos showed a small wooden house with a wraparound porch, a stone fireplace, and large windows overlooking miles of wilderness. The host's reviews were glowing, praising the remoteness and the beauty of the place. I booked it for 6 nights. I wish I could go back and cancel. The first sign that something was off appeared before I even arrived. The directions the host sent me were vague. Instead of a clear address, they included a series of landmarks and a set of GPS coordinates. "Reception is bad out there," they explained in the message. "This is the best way to find it." After 3 hours of winding roads and pine-choked valleys, I turned onto a narrow dirt track barely wide enough for my car. The trees closed in tightly, blocking out the sky, and the signal on my phone dropped to 0. I drove slowly, my tires crunching over leaves and gravel, until the forest suddenly opened into a small clearing. The cabin was exactly like the photos. Cozy, inviting. A warm amber light glowed from the porch light, and a stack of firewood leaned against the side of the house. There was a key in a small lockbox by the door. Everything seemed normal, perfect even. Inside, the cabin smelled faintly of cedar and wood smoke. It was one open space, a small kitchen, a reading nook by the window, and a bedroom loft up a narrow staircase. I unpacked my bag, started a fire, and sat on the porch with a cup of coffee as the sun dipped below the treetops. The forest was silent, almost unnaturally so. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves, just stillness. That first night I slept like a rock. It was the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that city life never allowed. But when I woke up just before dawn, I noticed something odd. The firewood I'd left stacked neatly beside the hearth was scattered across the floor. A few pieces were broken, as if someone had stepped on them. I told myself it was an animal. Maybe a raccoon had gotten in somehow. I checked the windows and doors, everything was locked. Shrugging it off, I cleaned up and went on with my day. The next evening, after a long hike through the surrounding woods, I returned to the cabin exhausted. The air felt colder than it should have. I started another fire, made dinner, and read by lamplight until I felt sleep tugging at my eyelids. Around midnight, I turned off the lights and climbed the ladder to the loft. I had just drifted off when I heard it. A soft creak from downstairs. I lay still, telling myself it was the old wood shifting in the cool night air. Then came another sound. A slow, deliberate step. Someone was walking across the cabin floor. I held my breath. Every muscle in my body tensed. Another step. And another. Slow, heavy, purposeful. The footsteps moved from the kitchen to the sitting area, then stopped directly below me. I couldn't see the main floor from the loft, but the silence that followed was worse than the noise. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure whoever, or whatever, was down there could hear it. After what felt like hours, the footsteps resumed, this time moving toward the door. Then nothing. Just silence and the faint crackle of the fire. I stayed awake until morning, knife in hand, staring down the ladder. When daylight finally filtered through the windows, I gathered the courage to go downstairs. Nothing was out of place. The door was still locked from the inside, but there were muddy footprints on the wooden floor leading from the door to the center of the room and back again. By the third night, I was on edge. I double-checked every lock. I piled furniture against the door. I even wedged a chair under the knob like I'd seen in movies. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. Something had been inside the cabin with me, and I had no idea how. I tried calling the host, but my phone still had no signal. I considered leaving, but the dirt road was narrow and treacherous in the dark. I convinced myself I'd be safer staying put until morning. I wish I had left. That night, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of breathing. Slow, steady, close. At first, I thought it was my own. Then I realized it was coming from just a few feet away. I opened my eyes and saw it, silhouetted in the faint moonlight spilling through the window. A figure standing at the edge of the loft, staring at me. Tall, motionless, silent. I froze. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. It just stood there watching. After what felt like minutes but was probably only seconds, it turned and descended the ladder, disappearing into the darkness below. I stayed in that bed until morning, too terrified to move. At first light, I packed my bag. I didn't care about the refund or the rest of the week. I was leaving. But when I tried the front door, it wouldn't open. The lock turned, but the door refused to budge, as if something heavy was blocking it from the outside. Panic surged through me. I ran to the windows, sealed shut. I grabbed a chair and smashed one open. The glass shattered, and I climbed through, scraping my arm on the frame as I dropped to the porch below. I sprinted to my car, heart hammering, lungs burning. I threw my bag into the back seat and jammed the key into the ignition. Nothing. The engine wouldn't turn over. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. In the tree line, maybe 20 yards away, stood 3 figures. All tall, all motionless, all watching me. I don't remember much after that, just pure animal panic. I ran. Through the forest, down the dirt road, stumbling and gasping until I finally found cell service hours later and called the police. When they arrived, the cabin was empty. My car was gone. The only sign I'd ever been there were the shattered window and the scattered wood by the hearth. The police said it was probably squatters or some local prank. But they couldn't explain how the door had been blocked from the outside. They couldn't explain the footprints, and they definitely couldn't explain how my car vanished without a trace. It's been months since that week, but I still can't sleep. Every night I wake up thinking I hear footsteps in my apartment. Every shadow looks like a figure standing just out of sight. Sometimes I dream of the cabin. I dream I'm back in that loft, frozen in bed, while 3 figures watch me from the dark. And when I wake up, there's a whisper in the room. Hello. Always the same word. Always the same voice. I don't know who or what was in that cabin with me. But I know one thing with absolute certainty. It was never meant to be empty. I don't scare easily. I grew up in New York City. Rats in the subway, drunk strangers screaming on the street at 2 a.m., cops raiding the building next door. It takes a lot to rattle me, but nothing prepared me for what happened in that Airbnb apartment. This was supposed to be a quiet weekend getaway, a solo trip. I'd been working non-stop for months, burning myself out with 2 jobs and barely sleeping, so I decided to treat myself to a long weekend in a different city. Somewhere calm, somewhere cheap. I found the listing on Airbnb late one night, an entire apartment in a historic building downtown. The pictures looked gorgeous. High ceilings, tall windows, exposed brick, a view of the river. The price was suspiciously low for the location, but the reviews were all 5 stars. Peaceful, charming, spotless. I didn't hesitate. I booked 3 nights. It was the worst decision of my life. The building itself was easy to miss. It was wedged between 2 larger complexes, its faded stone facade covered in ivy. A brass plaque near the door read Willow Court, 1893. The front entrance opened into a narrow hallway lined with antique mirrors and black and white photos of the city from a century ago. I messaged the host, call me Mark, and he sent me a code for the keypad. Apartment 3B, 3rd floor. Enjoy your stay, his message said. The stairs creaked beneath my feet as I climbed. The hallway on the 3rd floor was dim and oddly cold, even though it was warm outside. There were 4 doors, 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3D, but only one had a light on behind it, B. The lock beeped when I entered the code, and the door swung inward. The apartment was exactly like the photos. Beautiful, cozy, a sunlit living room with a couch and bookshelf, a small kitchen tucked into the corner, and a bedroom down a short hall. It even smelled nice, like old wood and fresh linen. There was just one thing that wasn't in the listing. A door. A heavy steel door built into the wall beside the bookshelf, bolted shut with a padlock. It didn't match the rest of the apartment at all. Newer, industrial, almost like something you'd see in a storage unit. I assumed it was a maintenance closet or utility access and didn't think much of it. That first night was uneventful. I made dinner, watched a movie, and fell asleep early. The mattress was soft, the city noise distant and comforting. For the first time in weeks, I slept deeply, but around 3:17 a.m., something woke me up. It wasn't a noise exactly, more like the absence of noise. The hum of the fridge had stopped. The pipes weren't creaking. The faint traffic sounds outside were gone. The entire apartment was silent. Then, clang. A deep metallic thud echoed from the living room, like something heavy shifting against metal. I sat up, my heart hammering. Another clang, then another. It was coming from the wall, from behind the steel door. I stared at it from the bedroom doorway, gripping the nearest thing I could find. A lamp. The noises stopped after a few minutes and everything went quiet again. I told myself it was pipes or old heating ducts or maybe the building settling. It was an old place after all. But when I checked the door in the morning, the padlock was gone. It hadn't fallen. It hadn't broken. It was just gone. I messaged the host. Hey, just wondering, what's the metal door in the living room? And do you know why the padlock's missing? Mark didn't reply for hours. When he finally did, the message was short. Please don't go near that door. It's not part of the rental. It will be secured again today, that was it. No explanation, no apology. I should have left right then, packed my bag and checked into a hotel. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the host would fix it, that I was overreacting. I spent the day exploring the city, trying to forget about it. But the second I stepped back into the apartment that evening, something felt off. The air was colder. The lights seemed dimmer. And the steel door was cracked open, not wide, just an inch. But enough. I stood there for a full minute, staring at that gap, trying to decide if I should call someone. Finally, against all logic, I reached out and pushed it open. It swung silently on its hinges, revealing a dark stairwell descending into the floor. A narrow spiral staircase built of old brick and rusted iron, disappearing into blackness. There was no smell of mildew, no draft of cold air, just an oppressive stillness, as if the space beyond had been sealed for a long, long time. I should have closed the door and walked away. But I didn't. I grabbed my phone flashlight and started down the steps. The staircase wound down farther than I expected. 2 floors, maybe 3. The walls were lined with old brick, some crumbling away, others blackened with age. At the bottom was a corridor, narrow and low, like something from an old cellar. There were doors down there, dozens of them, all made of heavy wood, each with a number painted above it. None of the numbers matched the apartments upstairs. Something about the air felt wrong, heavy, wet. I thought I heard dripping water somewhere deeper in the corridor. Then I noticed something else, marks on the floor. Long, thin scratches leading from one of the doors toward the stairs, like something had been dragged. My gut screamed at me to turn back, and for once I listened. I bolted up the stairs 2 steps at a time, slammed the steel door shut and shoved the bookshelf in front of it. My heart was still pounding when I collapsed onto the couch. I didn't sleep that night. Every so often I heard faint thuds from behind the wall, soft, rhythmic, like footsteps. The next morning, I woke up to a knock at the door. It was Mark. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, wearing a pressed suit and a fixed smile that didn't reach his eyes. Everything okay? He asked. I didn't mention the staircase. I just said the door was open. He frowned slightly. I'm sorry about that. It should have been locked. You didn't go inside, did you? No, I lied. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Please don't. It's not safe down there. Before I could ask anything else, he snapped the new padlock shut and left. I was more unsettled than ever. But I had one night left, and leaving early felt ridiculous. I told myself I could get through one more night. Just one. That night I triple-checked every lock and wedged a chair under the steel door handle. Then I took a sleeping pill and crawled into bed, determined to pass out until morning. I woke up at 3:19 a.m. At first I didn't know why. Then I realized the door to the bedroom was open. I knew I'd closed it. I always closed it. I sat up slowly. Something was moving in the living room. The light from the street lamps cast faint, shifting shapes through the curtains. A silhouette passed in front of them, tall, thin, jerky, like someone walking wrong. Then I heard the dragging, a long, slow scrape against the wooden floor. Then another. And another. It was coming closer. I grabbed my phone, but the screen was black. Dead. The power was out. The dragging stopped just outside the bedroom door, and then, in the darkness, something breathed. Rasping inches from the gap in the door, I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the shadows. Slowly, the door began to swing open. I don't remember what happened next. I woke up the next morning on the floor of the living room, the steel door wide open, the bookshelf shoved aside like it weighed nothing. My clothes were damp, my hands scraped and bloody. The padlock was gone. Again. I didn't wait to find out more. I grabbed my bag and ran. I reported everything to Airbnb. The listing disappeared a few days later. Mark never responded again. When I tried to look up Willow Court online, I found nothing. No building by that name, no property records, nothing. As if the place didn't exist. But sometimes late at night, I wake up at 3:17 a.m. and hear the dragging again. Not outside my apartment, inside. And I swear when I close my eyes, I see numbers painted above the doors in the dark. When my sister died, I thought the grief would kill me too. We were only 2 years apart, practically twins. And when the accident happened, something in me shattered. After the funeral, I stopped answering calls. I stopped eating. Days blurred into nights and nights into weeks. People told me to take time to heal, but what they really meant was, please get back to normal so we don't have to feel awkward around you. After 6 months, my therapist suggested something different. Go somewhere quiet, she said. Somewhere you can think without distractions. So I booked a week in a lakeside rental in northern Maine. It was a massive old vacation house tucked deep into the woods, 3 hours from the nearest town. The listing called it Stillwater Retreat, a perfect place to reset, reflect, and reconnect. It sounded like exactly what I needed. I told myself the trip was about healing. But deep down, I knew why I really chose that place. My sister and I used to spend our summers by a lake just like it. And part of me, some desperate, broken part, wanted to feel close to her again. I wish I'd never gone. The house was even bigger than the pictures had shown. 3 floors of creaking timber and wide, glass windows that looked out over Stillwater Lake. It sat at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by nothing but pine forest and silence. The nearest neighbors were miles away. The host, a polite older man named Richard, greeted me when I arrived. He wore a wool sweater despite the warm weather and smelled faintly of pipe tobacco. You're the first guest we've had this season, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The house can feel a little lonely, but I'm sure you'll enjoy the peace. I asked about kayaking and hiking trails, and he told me about a small dock out back. Oh, he added almost as an afterthought, don't swim too far out. The lake gets deep quickly. It was a strange warning, but I nodded. The first 2 days passed quietly. I read on the porch. I made long walks through the woods. I sat by the water at night, staring at the stars and talking to my sister out loud like she could hear me. It was peaceful. Healing even. But on the 3rd night, everything changed. It started with the knocking. I woke around 2:30 a.m. to a dull thump somewhere downstairs. At first, I thought it was the house settling. Then it came again, louder this time, thump, thump, thump. I held my breath, listening. Silence. Then a voice. A woman's voice, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it was definitely coming from the living room. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand and crept down the stairs. The house was dark, the moonlight casting faint silver shapes across the floor. Nobody was there, but the front door was open, not just unlocked, wide open. I was certain I'd locked it before bed. My heart started pounding. I slammed it shut, threw the bolt, and checked every window. All secure, no sign of forced entry. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I'd forgotten to lock it after watching the sunset on the porch. I went back to bed, eventually falling into a restless sleep. But the next morning I found wet footprints on the hardwood floor. Bare feet, leading from the door to the center of the room, and then stopping. On the 4th day, I decided to leave early. I'd paid for a week, but I didn't care. Something about the house felt wrong. Too still, too watchful. But when I went to pack, I noticed something strange. My clothes weren't where I'd left them. My toothbrush was in the kitchen sink. My phone charger was coiled neatly on the porch railing. Someone had been inside. I searched every room, heart racing, calling out to see if anyone was there. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints in the dust upstairs. Just those wet marks by the door. I decided to drive into town and stay at a motel for the night. But when I went to start my car, it wouldn't even turn over. The battery was dead. I don't know why I didn't call the police right then. Maybe I didn't want to sound crazy. Maybe part of me still believed it was all just my imagination. I wish I had called. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting for something to happen. It did. Around 2 a.m. I heard a splash, then another. I got up and walked to the window overlooking the lake. The water was perfectly still except for a single ripple moving toward shore. Something, or someone, was swimming. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside. The night air was cold and damp, and the forest loomed dark around me. At the edge of the dock, I swept the beam across the lake. Nothing. Just water and moonlight. Then the beam caught something. A face pale and bloated just beneath the surface. Staring up at me, I screamed and stumbled backward, dropping the flashlight into the water. When I looked again, the face was gone. I ran back to the house and barricaded the door. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I called Richard. My hands were shaking as I told him what happened. There was a long pause on the other end. Then he sighed. "You must have seen one of them," he said quietly. "One of what?" I demanded, but he hung up. I tried calling again, but the number was disconnected. I searched for the listing on Airbnb. Gone, like it had never existed. Panic clawed at my chest. I grabbed my bag, determined to walk the miles to the nearest road if I had to. But when I stepped outside, something stopped me dead. There were wet footprints on the porch. Dozens of them, leading into the house. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen. Eventually, I forced myself back inside and locked the door. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow looked like a figure watching me. At some point, exhaustion won, and I drifted into a fitful sleep on the couch. I woke up to breathing. Soft. Wet. Close. I opened my eyes and froze. A woman was standing in the middle of the living room. Her skin was gray and bloated, water dripping from her hair. Her eyes were milky white, her lips blue. She was barefoot, leaving damp footprints wherever she moved. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stared as she turned her head toward me, her neck creaking like a rotted branch. "Help me," she whispered. Then she was gone. Not walked away, gone. Like she'd dissolved into the air. The rest of that day is a blur. I remember pacing the house, muttering to myself, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I remember searching the shoreline for footprints, for anything that would prove I wasn't losing my mind. And then I found it. A door, hidden beneath the dock, half submerged in the water. A heavy, rusted door set into the earth itself, like an entrance to a cellar. I never would have noticed it if the water level hadn't dropped overnight. It was locked with a corroded iron chain, but the wood around it was soft, rotting. It took only a few kicks to splinter it open. I don't know why I went inside. Curiosity? Desperation? Maybe I thought I'd find answers. Instead, I found a staircase. It led down beneath the lake, deeper and deeper, until the air grew damp and heavy, and the light from my phone barely reached the walls. The tunnel ended in a small stone chamber, and there, floating in knee-deep water, were bodies. 5, maybe 6. Men and women, all waterlogged and decaying, their faces twisted in silent screams. I stumbled back, choking on bile. But before I could climb the stairs, something moved. One of the bodies opened its eyes and it smiled. I don't remember getting back to the house. I don't remember running through the forest. The next thing I recall is waking up in a hospital 2 days later. A hiker had found me unconscious on the road, covered in cuts and mud. My car was never found. Neither was the house. The police said there's no record of a property called Stillwater Retreat. The lake itself isn't even called Stillwater. It's officially named Black Pine Reservoir, and there are no structures on its shores. No docks, no rentals, nothing, but I know what I saw. I know what was under that lake, and sometimes late at night, I dream of her. The woman with the gray skin and white eyes standing at the foot of my bed, dripping water onto the floor. "Help me," she whispers. And when I wake, there's a puddle by the door, always fresh, always growing.